What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 28 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Seattle Seahawks. Before we get started, I do want to ask a big favor. Please do hit that like button down below. Would really help me out. This series is a major endeavor. I'm not going to be able to put out the volume of content that I normally would. So it's really important to me and the success of this channel that these videos do well. And by you hitting this like button, it tells YouTube to push this video out to other NFL fans like you. So it would really help me out if you could just take a second to hit that like button down below. It goes a long way. And if you enjoy the video, make sure you do subscribe so you do not miss any of these deep dives as we count down to the number one team in my power rankings. But let's get into Seattle at number 28. Definitely a little bit weird having them so low. I feel like we've spent the last decade pretty optimistic about the Seahawks heading into each given season. You go through the Legion of Boom. Russell Wilson, of course, has spent a lot of time as a top 5 quarterback. We'll just say that. And all of that is gone. And it's a team that has been kind of forced into a rebuild in a lot of ways. Yet you have a 70-year-old head coach that I think believes blindly that this team is still going to win and compete this year, because that's just what Pete Carroll's makeup is. So definitely an interesting team. Is Pete Carroll right that this team can compete? Well, let's just get into it. And we're going to start by talking about this team's offseason. So, of course, the big Russell Wilson trade. And let's just face the music here. Anytime you trade away a quarterback the caliber of Russell Wilson, even if he's had a couple of down years, I suppose, you're going to walk away the loser in that situation. And there's no Chargers anime style press release that you can put together that's going to soften the blow here for Seahawks fans. The only thing you can do is retool and move forward and do a good job with the pieces they did get. And, again, you never want to trade a quarterback like Russell Wilson. The fact that they got in a situation where they felt it was time to move on, it's just unfortunate, whatever the reasons may be. But I will say, if you had to trade Russell Wilson, I didn't mind what they got back. Very valuable picks, and Noah Fant, who's a excellent explosive tight end with a lot of good football still ahead of him, and even a good defensive tackle like Shelby Harris. Like, they got a pretty good haul for Russell Wilson, but it's of course going to create so much uncertainty with this quarterback room and this team in general. So that's obviously just the kind of a cloud, like this big rain cloud. I know the Seahawks, the Seattle natives, are very familiar with rain clouds. You've now put one permanently over your organization until you can get that quarterback situation figured out. But that's not the only thing that's happened this offseason. They've also made a pretty major staff change here as they bring in Sean Desai to kind of be the defensive overseer here. And beyond that, he is now an associate head coach, basically signaling if he does a good job, he's the heir apparent to Pete Carroll, which they need. He's 70 years old and frankly has been trending downwards. So I do like that move quite a bit. We'll talk a lot more about Sean Desai and what his defense is going to look like as we move forward. But it hasn't just been quarterback and staff changes. They've done a lot of work with this roster, and they've had a pretty clean, I would describe it as an eye for an eye offseason. They lose one piece and they add another piece at that position group. Some upgrades, some downgrades, but you see Gerald Everett, their tight end, on the way out. They bring in Noah Fant in that Russell Wilson trade. Of course, you have the quarterback swap, getting Drew Lock in the building here. And then you look at the offensive line. They lose 2 veteran tackles, Brandon Shell, Dwayne Brown, while they turn around and draft Charles Cross in the top 10 and add Abraham Lucas, another interesting pick in the 3rd round. At center, they lose Ethan Pocic, a veteran there. They swap him out for a veteran center in Austin Blythe, who Shane Waldron is familiar with, having worked with him back in their time with the LA Rams. The one, I guess, clear-cut upgrade is going to be adding Kenneth Walker to that running back room, though you could theoretically add Chris Carson as a loss, as it doesn't really seem like he's going to be able to contribute this season. I did leave him off, however, because we just don't know about that situation. But then you look at the defense, and it's definitely, I would say, a bit of a youth movement here. Seattle's always a team that's going to want, at least as Pete Carroll's there, they're going to want some veterans in the building, competing, mentoring, like just kind of their culture there. But they are certainly, especially with their front seven, saying goodbye to a lot of veterans and hoping that some of these pieces they've really invested highly in, guys like LJ Collier, Darrell Taylor, Cody Barton, that these guys can step up and that their development will get them to a point where they're ready to go. So you're saying goodbye to, about 3,000 plus snaps just in their front seven alone, with veterans on the edge with Carlos Dunlap, Benson Mayowa, Kerry Hyder, Rasheem Green. These guys played a ton last year, and they're all gone. They also released Bobby Wagner, let him free. He goes and signs with the Rams to get a little revenge. And then just a little bit of movement in the secondary as they do say goodbye to DJ Reed, who had a nice little breakout season last year, going to create a pretty gaping hole in that cornerback room. That's really the one spot where I would say they don't have a clear-cut answer for. Now, all that said, they're not just going to youth on defense. They get Shelby Harris in the Russell Wilson trade. They sign Uchenna Nwosu. They sign Quentin Jefferson. They sign Justin Coleman. So that's where you get a little complicated as far as, Pete Carroll still thinks this is going to be a team that competes this year. And I think those veteran signings are Pete Carroll type of players that are still going to get a lot of playing time this year, even if it might be better to just go to the youth and just start a full kind of retooling, rebuild here. But that's kind of what makes this Seahawks team so interesting. The last addition here is Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati. Perimeter corner, was a 4th round pick. We'll talk about kind of his prospects here for the Seahawks team in just a little bit. But for now, let's jump over to the coach and scheme breakdown. The aforementioned Pete Carroll still here, 70 years old now. And man, I have been so disappointed in just the Pete Carroll regime the last 2 years. I think he is trending downwards. The game is passing him by in certain ways. He's just, I don't want to call him stubborn. I like Pete Carroll. Probably a Hall of Fame coach, at least like a football Hall of Fame guy. I don't know how that works with his college resume and all that stuff, but without trying to be rude to Pete Carroll, who's accomplished everything in this league, it hasn't really been pretty the last couple of years. You have this sort of off-field power struggle with Russell Wilson. You have a team that has been criticized heavily for basically not keeping up with the times, whether it's running too much base defense in 2019 or constantly resorting to being a run the ball, play defense type of team. It's just not the direction the NFL is going, and those criticisms still sit here today. I think he's tried to keep an open mind. There's been little, nudges in the direction of being a more modern philosophy, but it's just always going to be deep rooted in Pete Carroll, and it's going to really perspirate throughout the rest of the organization as well. So, he's a great leader. Players have always stepped up and played hard for Pete Carroll. They still won 7 games last year in what was an otherwise pretty disastrous season. And it is difficult to picture a Pete Carroll coached football team like getting the number 1 pick. But man, they just have not been able to get over this sort of level of mediocrity that they've been at. And it definitely feels like it's time for a change with Pete Carroll. I thought it was going to come this offseason, especially when you're talking about moving on from Russell Wilson. It just seems like a timely thing. You look at like the Seahawks, the Lions, and some other teams that move on from franchise quarterbacks. They also move on from their head coach and just kind of blow everything up and start from rock bottom. You're not doing that with the Seahawks. So it's interesting. I do rank them 21st for head coaching. but he's definitely been trending downwards as of late. The one thing I will say is he does seem to be kind of giving up the defense a little bit to Sean Desai. And I understand Clint Hurt is technically listed as the defensive coordinator, but this is Sean Desai's defense. He's the associate head coach, was the defensive coordinator for the Bears, a well-respected defensive mind in the NFL right now. This was a good get for the Seahawks. And, you know, he runs a very, very different system than Pete Carroll has always kind of overseen, with that sort of 4-3 front, a ton of cover 3. That is not the Sean Desai defense. Desai stems from the Vic Fangio tree, and the Seahawks last year started to flirt with a lot more of the concepts that you get in a Vic Fangio defense, which is 3-4 fronts and running a lot more off quarters coverage and more match heavy zone concepts. Not so much that press cover 3 Seahawks defense that we've been so accustomed to over the last few years. So you're going to see a definite evolution of this defense. We started to see it a little bit last year, but now you have a coach that's, you know, kind of all in on a new system here. And it was definitely time. Like, there was so much pride, I think, in that Legion of Boom cover 3 defense that it just took them a long time to evolve. And I think this is one big positive step. This is a defense that is very much trending around the league. So you are going to see a lot more quarters, off coverage, and 3-4 fronts being the base defense here with Sean Desai. So that's a good move to go and get him, and I hope he succeeds and becomes a head coach. He's definitely a likable, ascending defensive mind around the league. But then you look at the offensive side of the ball, it's also Shane Waldron's offense. So I do think Pete's very much kind of taken a step back, which I think is a step in the right direction for the Seahawks to get that transition, just kind of being that CEO type of head coach. And Shane Waldron is going to be running the offense here for the second year in a row. And he is a Sean McVay disciple through and through. That is his offense. It is a wide zone base blocking scheme. Get those linemen on the move, outside zone, and create play action opportunities off of it. It is in the Shanahan tree, although guys like Shane Waldron, Zach Taylor for Cincinnati, and Sean McVay, of course, at the top of that tree, have branched off a kind of different, I suppose, version of the Shanahan offense. You know, Shanahan loves 12 personnel, a ton of, you know, big packages, create play action out of those on early downs. With the Seahawks here and the Bengals and the Rams, it's a lot more 3 wide, 11 personnel, and a lot more quick game on early downs as well, because you have more wide receivers on the field. So it's the kind of concepts and the blocking schemes are very similar, but it is in a slightly different, you know, style, I suppose, as opposed to like what we just did with Atlanta, for example, who are much more of a, you know, big packages, a little more run heavy, for example. You know, it's a little bit more of a modernized version. I like Shane Waldron. I thought he did a pretty good job in year one. Certainly wasn't perfect, but a young mind with the right ideas, and he's got a lot of toys to play with this year. I will say that, which is a good transition as we move on to the kind of weaponry and the quarterbacks here. But yeah, I don't hate the coaching here. I think it's solid. They rank kind of mid-20s across the board, whether it's Pete Carroll, whether it's Shane Waldron, or the defensive coaching. It's just nothing that's like elite at this point in time, but I think the coaching is better than the roster talent here in Seattle, which you hope that coaching can get the roster to catch up, you know? So let's do that. Let's get into the roster. Let's talk about the players here. We are going to start with the passing game. Then we'll get into the running game. We'll talk about the offensive ranking overall. Then we'll do the pass defense ranking, the run defense ranking, do the defense, and then we'll wrap up with the schedule prediction for this team. But yeah, let's get into the passing game, starting with the quarterback room. And, you got Drew Lock there. You got Geno Smith. Okay, it's going to be a little bit of a competition between these two. I will say I have a pretty strong opinion that Baker Mayfield is going to end up here in Seattle. The show must go on. I can't just plug him in here and assume that that's going to happen, but I have a very strong feeling that it is. He just seems like such a good fit systematically, culture-wise, and man, he's just better than what they have here. So I do think it happens. If and when it does, they actually jump from 30th here up to 19th for a quarterback. I do think it's pretty ridiculous that Baker isn't currently a starter heading into the year at this point in time. Like, I think he got the short end of the stick with Cleveland. I really do. He was really good in 2020. I think he was a top half of the league quarterback at least. And then last year, the team kind of fell apart in Cleveland. And they go and get Deshaun Watson, and then for some reason nobody wants to go get a different quarterback in 2022, and he's just kind of sitting there in Cleveland throwing his hands up like, what the hell? Like, Drew Lock is starting in Seattle. Why am I not out there now getting reps with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett ready to go? I think there's some complications as far as the Deshaun Watson off the field stuff at this point in time. And I think Seattle is possibly playing hardball as well because they know they hold all the cards. It is the obvious destination for Baker Mayfield. So for Cleveland, they might have to give Seattle a draft pick, actually, to get Baker's contract off the books. If Cleveland cuts Baker Mayfield, they have to pay his $19 million contract against the cap. If they trade him, it's off their books entirely. So there's definitely some hardball going on, some complicated stuff, but this is the obvious Baker Mayfield destination. And I do want to point out that, as the summer goes on, I expect it to happen. They would jump to 19th for a quarterback, and their team ranking would actually jump up to 25th. So I do want to clarify that for when it does happen, but the show must go on. We got to talk about what they have here right now. So you've got Drew Lock and Geno Smith kind of duking it out for the quarterback, starting quarterback position here. Like, I could see this going either way. Drew Lock maybe 2 years ago was an interesting, maybe he develops type of quarterback, but man, the development just has not been there. He had plenty of help in Denver, and it just never got there. He is a first read quarterback through and through. And, in the structure of that first read, like, if you can get receivers open, like, he can have some games where he looks pretty good. But the reality is he has a tendency that ain't breaking at this point in time, where if he doesn't like what he sees immediately, he's going to run. He's going to take off and resort to that backyard improvisational, did I say that right? Improvisational quarterback style where, he's going to abandon completely clean pockets. He's going to pass up on and just not see secondary receivers coming open on read number 2 and 3. And he's going to run around, he's going to scramble, he's going to, point his receivers in different directions and try to make some plays. And sometimes it works, a lot of times it doesn't. He's going to turn the ball over a ton. You're going to be sitting there looking back and saying, wow, that, this is just so inconsistent. You'll get some games where he looks great. And that's why a lot of Broncos fans for a long time would point to one game here or one game there, and they're like, see, he has it in him. If you can just get that 16 games a year, you've got a great quarterback. And yes, that's true, but until he can step up into a clean pocket and play within the structure of the offense, it's just never going to be there. And I don't think you're going to get that out of him. So he's probably the starter at this point in time, but Geno, I think, is right behind him. Geno's been in the league for a long time. He got 4 starts last year when Russell got hurt, and he kind of kept the Seahawks in a lot of games. He was a competitive, kind of fringe starting level quarterback last year, and I really think there's a good chance they do go to Geno because he's going to make less mistakes. He's much better in structure. He can actually sit in a clean pocket, pass up a first read, get to number 2. he just doesn't offer those crazy big games that we talked about with Drew Lock. You know, you're probably not seeing Geno coming out throwing 300 yards and 3 touchdowns with some pretty epic plays like Drew Lock is going to be capable of. So it's definitely a trade-off. We'll just kind of see how this plays out. Whoever starts here, I think you're looking at about the 30th best quarterback, more or less, and you're not winning a lot of football games with either of these guys. Again, we'll see if they go get Baker, and that kind of changes the landscape of this team a little bit. I would really like that move, but until that happens, we can't spend that much time talking about it. So 30th for quarterback. You also have Jacob Eason there, by the way, who was a 4th round pick with a rocket arm. Maybe we see him. It'd be fun. He's back in Washington now. But one really nice thing about this Seahawks team is they do have one of the best group of weapons in the league. So whoever is at quarterback, it's actually, I would say, an underratedly good situation for the quarterback. Ranking 6th for weaponry for me. You have a premium wide receiver duo. I don't know if we can quite call this the best wide receiver duo in the league, but it is certainly up there. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and they're such a great complement of each other because you have DK, who is, you know, kind of a smaller route tree, but he's going to play on the outside. Is there a better deep threat in the NFL right now than DK Metcalf? I don't think so. You know, I guess Tyreek Hill would be the one guy, but DK also brings comparable speed. Not quite as fast, but at 6'4", 230 pounds. There's only like a couple NFL defensive backs that can physically hang with DK Metcalf. Ironically, one of them is Jalen Ramsey, and he's in this division. We get to see that battle twice a year. But, God, he's such a freak, man. I really hope they extend him. I think they want to work that out. But, God, he just elevates things for this offense and forces defenses to just basically stay on top of him and keep an eye on him because he is a 60-plus yard touchdown waiting to happen if you're not constantly accounting for him to beat you over the top. And he takes advantage of that underneath with slants and hitches and stuff as well. And then you have Tyler Lockett, who is your route running guru type, who just happens to have rare ability to track the ball and win contested catch situations. You don't see receivers Tyler Lockett's size that are so capable of making those tough catches. He plays above his 5'10" frame or whatever when you put the ball in the air. But he's excellent at getting open, great route runner, he's got the speed, and again, he can also contribute as a deep threat. So these guys are awesome. And then you have D. Eskridge behind them. So it's a very massive drop-off after those two. And with Lockett getting up there in age, DK does have a contract situation. Again, I think they'll figure it out. But they definitely need somebody else to step up here. I will say that. You've got D. Eskridge, who I almost look at 2022 as his rookie season, just as a second-round pick last year, started the season injured and had a hard time kind of in the middle of the year getting on the field, getting those reps from a Freddie Swain or even a Penny Hart. This is a big year for him. He's already 25 years old for a year 2 player, so the expectation should be that he steps up and takes that opportunity as this team's number 3 wide receiver. And there's a big opportunity there. We talked earlier about how Shane Waldron ideally can live in 11 personnel most of the time with these 3 wide receivers on the field. So Eskridge is, you know, a younger, although not that much younger, but, you know, a NFL younger version of Tyler Lockett. He's a smaller player, but really good route runner. The ball skills would be the big question. I don't think he's ever going to be as good as Tyler Lockett is at winning those tough balls. Lockett's just a unicorn in that way. But the upside for him is certainly there. And the expectation is, again, that he can step in and provide a reliable third option that can get open. Beyond him, you have some interesting depth, to be honest. I like the depth chart here, just some kind of fun wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 types. Freddie Swain's just kind of a smooth, balanced wide receiver. He played okay last year. I think as a 4th wide receiver, he's fine. You have Marquise Goodwin, who is another deep threat here. I think he might make the team if he's healthy, and he's a nice backup to have for if something happens to Metcalf or Lockett. You have a guy that can be that speedy deep threat and step in. Penny Hart is kind of a, guy that gets pinned as a gadget type because he's so small, but a really effective route runner with good hands. And I don't know if he makes this team, but he's fine as a 6th wide receiver. But they draft 2 very intriguing players in the 7th round here. Bo Melton out of Rutgers, most thought was just a total steal. And even if I wasn't the biggest Bo Melton guy, to get him in the 7th round is a no-brainer. This is a guy with speed in the 4.3s and someone that dealt with really bad quarterback play at Rutgers. So a guy that I do think has a lot of room to develop his routes. I think his ball skills are frankly miserable. So that's definitely a concern for him. It's why I was lower on him. But in the 7th round, for a team that has hit on a Tyler Lockett, that's hit on a Golden Tate, that's hit on a Doug Baldwin, he's in that mold of really athletic, smaller-ish receivers that can just really surprise. So keep an eye on Bo Melton for sure. And then Derek Young, I haven't really watched a lot of his game, to be completely honest. He's not someone I watched before the draft, but out of Lenore Ryan, 6'2", 224 pounds, the guy ran in the 4.4s, they see him as a DK Metcalf backup, a really big, strong, fast receiver that, we'll see if he makes the 53, but maybe they stash him on the practice squad, and if DK does get hurt, maybe you call him up and see if he can give you 80% of that role. And then even beyond that, you got Cody Thompson, who I liked as a kind of intermediate aficionado coming out of Toledo, Aaron Fuller, a slower but capable deep threat, and Cade Johnson, who most thought was a draftable player last year, is a good slot guy. So they have a ton of interesting depth. It's going to be a tough call for this team as far as who makes the team. You can't keep every one of these guys, but I would go with 7 of them because I think you have some guys that are just very interesting in this wide receiver depth room. But then with the tight end group, it's a very good tight end group as well. You start with Noah Fant, who, again, this is a receiving grade, so he's a very, good starter, right on the fringe of that high-end starter. His flashes are incredible. I mean, he's got just massive games on his resume, but the thing with Noah Fant is he'll just disappear for like 4 or 5 weeks, and he's never had good quarterback play. It doesn't look like that's going to change here, but this guy was a first-round pick, a tight end that's got 4.5 speed. He's got ball skills. He's good after the catch, and he's a huge weapon and a big addition here. To have him as a 3rd piece here is excellent. Like, most people don't have a guy as explosive as Noah Fant as their 3rd option. So you love that. You got Will Dissly, who is definitely more of a blocking type, but strong hands, tough guy to bring down after the catch as a number 2 tight end. You're happy with that. Colby Parkinson is also interesting to me. Really big-bodied guy with excellent ball skills who's more of a big slot type. He's kind of a crappy version of how I felt about Charlie Kolar, for those that have been around this channel and know how I feel about him. Just not quite as good of a route runner as Kolar, but just that big, massive target from the slot that uses his body really well, and he's a good blocker when he can play from the slot. So an interesting kind of matchup problem for defenses, and got on the field in the second half of last season and had some moments. So you got to keep an eye on Colby Parkinson as a 3rd tight end there. And then Mabry and Brewer will probably be duking it out for either practice squad or a tight end 4 spot. And then you have a pretty deep running back room as well. Excited to see what Kenneth Walker can offer as a receiving back, because you have, Travis Homer here, who's a good kind of scat back type, but ahead of Homer, there's not a lot of competition for a third down back to really thrive here in the receiving game. And it's not something Michigan State asked of him a whole lot. So he kind of got more like a question mark as opposed to a bad grade coming out of Michigan State as far as his ability in the receiving game. So I'm just excited to see how the hands are. Is he a natural guy transitioning upfield, going from receiver to running back, and how do his routes look? He is a very explosive player with a ton of upside as a receiving back. So I'm excited to see how much he works at that craft, and can he become I can't think of a perfect comp off the top of my head, but like Kareem Hunt level receiving back, I suppose, is where I'm getting, because he has incredible upside as a receiving threat. Just again, needs to prove that he can handle that role, because he just wasn't asked of it at Michigan State. But beyond Homer and Walker, you've got Rashad Penny, who we'll definitely talk more about when we get to the running game breakdown here. He just has never been a stable receiving back. He's a big dude who's a little bit stiffer in space, so it's not really his game. Chris Carson's kind of a wild card here. It's not expected that he plays a whole lot, so I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about him, but he's a really good screen threat. Just a tough guy to bring down in space, and he's got good instincts after the catch, just not a super great route runner or anything like that. Good hands as well. So if he's healthy, he's an option. And then you got DJ Dallas. Going back to his days at Miami, was a good receiving back, but hasn't done as much here in Seattle. And I guess you got to keep an eye on Darwin Thompson as well. Really explosive scat back coming out of Utah State. But he couldn't get that role for the Chiefs when he had a big opportunity to capture it. So it's hard to picture him getting that here. But definitely someone to keep an eye on at least. So you love the weaponry. They rank 6th. And then let's talk about this offensive line, which unfortunately is the worst ranked pass blocking group in the league. So we're going to start talking about them as pass blockers, then we'll revisit them as run blockers in just a moment. But at left tackle, you do like what you have in Charles Cross. Do you expect him to be better than Dwayne Brown in year one? It's possible. Brown was starting to slow down a little bit, and Cross is just a technician, man. He was so consistent on film, snap in, snap out. Just has the fundamentals of pass protection down to a T. Just stays square, keeps an excellent base, is so accurate and strong with his hands, and he just finds his hands inside and mirrors with his feet with the best of them. So I do think he's going to be a very capable pass protector day one. I loved this pick. There was a fear that the Seahawks weren't going to do what they should have and just get the franchise left tackle with that 9th overall pick. Don't get cute. And they didn't. That's been a big critique of this team, is the draft philosophy. They did the right thing, taking Charles Cross. So you're very excited about that. But beyond that, oof. Like triple, quadruple oof. Damian Lewis. I love Damian Lewis. I think if you had 4 really good pass blockers around him, you can protect his inability to protect, if that makes sense. But when the guys around him are also getting beat, it highlights how bad he can be at times. Just really bad with his feet. He leans. He's just much more comfortable moving forward than he is moving backwards. He was a horrible pass protector at LSU, and I liked him coming out. I had a second round grade on him, I think, or third round. I loved where they got him. He's been a mauler in the run game, which we'll talk about, but God, it is not pretty as a pass protector, and you just kind of live with it because he is so good as a run blocker. But that's a liability from a pass protection standpoint. They go and get Austin Blythe, who again is a good athlete, definitely fits the zone blocking scheme in the run game, but lighter dude, gets overwhelmed by power, did not stick in Kansas City coming off of a significant injury, and even going back to his time with the Rams in 2020, was not some highly efficient pass blocker. Gave up 31 pressures in 2020, 38 in 2019, 36 in 2018. So pretty consistently getting beat. I think you can expect the same, if not worse, for him at now 30 years old, having not played for 2 years. So I don't hate the signing. You hope he's healthy and can revive his career a little bit here, but it's certainly not, great. You got Gabe Jackson at right guard. Very solid, good veteran piece. Not so much worried about him. Anchor, excellent. Foot speed is where he can get beat, but he's far from the biggest problem you have here. And then at right tackle, they draft Abraham Lucas in the third round. I had a late second round grade on Lucas. I think this was a great pick. Now he's going to have to beat out Jake Kieran at right tackle, who started a decent amount of games for this team last year. But watching Seattle back, Kieran is a horrid pass protector, just really slow feet. The athletic pass rushers were running circles around him. So you definitely hope that Lucas wins this job out and can step in and do what he did at Washington State down the road. You've got a guy that was an excellent pass protector for a long time and just is going to be comfortable day one against NFL level pass rushers. He's not going to be perfect. I think there's a lot to clean up, but definitely just similar to Charles Cross, honestly, like foundationally keeps a good base, good length, strong dude. And he's a really good athlete as well. And I'm curious to see, we'll get to him as a run blocker in a little bit, but that's a big question mark there. And if Jake Kieran starts, that's worse. I think Kieran's a good run blocker. He's a strong dude. He's a tough dude, but again, that pass protection was really bad there. So there's your likely starting five. I think the left tackle through right guard is pretty cut and dry. And then the right tackle is going to be a bit of a competition. As far as the depth goes, at tackle, Stone Forsythe was a solid pass protector coming out of Florida. Just as far as this system goes, he just is not an athlete and is going to struggle in the run game. And I think that's given him a hard time to get on the field there. And then you got really nobodies in Island and Ryan. So the tackle depth is not great. I do like Phil Haynes quite a bit as an interior piece here. And I don't know if he can play center because I think he could potentially be better than Austin Blythe. So I guess keep an eye on that. But Phil Haynes has not been a starter here, like been given a starting job. But you go back to 2020 in their playoff game, he stepped in and got his first career start against Green Bay and played great. And he got a few starts last year and looked really good in those starts as well. So the guard situation's, locked in here. You're not moving on from Lewis or Gabe Jackson this year. So can Phil Haynes compete at center? I think it's possible. I think he's a really strong, ascending prospect, basically. So do keep an eye on him. But beyond him, it's really not even really worth noting. Fuller or Shepley, they've been in the league for a few years and have given you nothing. Fuller ended up starting a lot of games last year and was horrid. And then you've got some interesting athletes there. Lestage, Gilmore, Gotell, who we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, 32nd for pass blocking, getting the worst grade in the league on the Pass Pro. So kind of up and down unit towards the bottom as far as quarterback and pass blocking, but towards the top with the weaponry definitely helps out here. They rank 26th overall for the passing game. I think they'll have some moments. I really do. Especially if Drew Lock is in there winging slinging the ball around with these receivers. You're going to get some big games. Like you're going to have, probably some pretty big upsets if you get a good Drew Lock game with these receivers. But, Geno, the bad Drew Lock games, double, So there's your passing game ranking. Nothing too exciting. But now let's talk about the run game and, a couple of interesting running backs here. Rashad Penny, Kenneth Walker. It was interesting that they drafted Kenneth Walker. The pick has grown on me since I was, pretty just negative about it when they made the pick. But the more you look at it, the more I hear about Chris Carson, just doesn't sound very good. I'm probably not even going to talk about Chris Carson here because it just doesn't sound like he's going to play. And I think the drafting of Kenneth Walker definitely alludes to that. So it makes a little bit more sense. But it was still interesting because Rashad Penny, a former first-round pick, stayed healthy and showed why he was a first-round pick. This guy's a really explosive runner, and in this system, he really makes sense. Now, he's, getting up there in age. He's on the last year of his contract. So I get, not wanting to pay a running back. That's like a double standard, right? I think drafting a running back in the second round makes sense, and not paying a running back makes sense. But I think you're still pretty excited about what Rashad Penny's going to do this year. And from like a fantasy football perspective, it's going to be pretty messy between these two. And you're probably going to get, kind of a hot hand approach with these guys. But yeah, man, Penny is, without getting too crazy here, like he's a poor man's Derrick Henry. Straight line speed, explosive, tough, like big guy, tough to tackle when he gets a lane in an outside zone system like this. And obviously being healthy was a big part of his success last year, where in the last 6 weeks of the season, he was one of the best running backs in the entire NFL. But this was the first year of this wide zone blocking scheme. And there's a reason to me he was so effective in this offense. So he to me is actually trending upwards if he can stay healthy, which is a major if. But you also have Kenneth Walker here. And Walker's another guy that just brings explosiveness, just 4.4 speed. The dude can run away from linebackers and safeties. He's a home run threat through and through. A guy that makes a lot of sense in this blocking scheme. And if and when he becomes the lead back here for a team that I do believe is going to want to run the ball a ton, he's going to be probably one of the more productive running backs in the league, assuming they can, get the blocking and everything to be good in front of him, which is important. I didn't love his vision coming out. I really didn't. I was actually a little bit lower on Kenneth Walker. I think he looks to kick everything outside. But again, that was in an inside zone / power run game for Michigan State. He's going to be able to kick everything outside in a wide zone blocking scheme. So it makes a lot of sense. His juke move and just wiggle in space is special. So definitely a good fit here in Seattle. It is a pick that's grown on me and should be, in contention to be a top 10 running back before too long. It is. He definitely has that sort of upside and opportunity here in Seattle. Now, they only rank 21st because it is a rookie and a guy in Rashad Penny who's been in the league for 4 years, and his best 6 games were his last 6 games. So I do think it's trending up. I think there's a good chance this is a top half running back room by the end of the league, by the end of the year, if not a top 10 running back room. But you're going off of potential there, and it's just tough to rank them so high coming into the year. But I like the duo. I'm not really going to talk about Chris Carson. We know what Carson is. Big, bruising, tough dude. I just don't think we see him this year. Travis Homer is a scat back and an option on third downs in the receiving game if Kenneth Walker can't claim that role, but not going to bring you quite as much in the run game. DJ Dallas, I think, is fine as a backup. He's had some good runs in the NFL, but just pretty inconsistent. Darwin Thompson, probably not going to make the team, but again, someone I think is a fascinating, juiced up little scat back. So there's your running back room. And then you talk about the run blocking here. They rank 25th for run blocking, so definitely better than they were for their pass blocking as we revisit this offensive line. Charles Cross, I think, can be a much better run blocker at the next level than basically what we saw of him at Michigan State. He's got all the athleticism. I thought when he did run block, it looked perfectly fine to me, but he's doing it out of a 2-point stance in a spread college system where, as in the NFL, he's going to put his hand in the dirt and be asked to, get downhill, reach a linebacker, and drive the defensive end much more than he did in one of the most pass-happy systems in all of football. So I think the potential's there. There might be a learning curve, but no reason he can't become a very good run blocker. He's got all the traits to do it. We've talked about Damian Lewis being an excellent run blocker. This dude just brings a rare combination of get-off and strength. He can drive people up front. He can pull when this team does want to run power, and he can definitely get on the move. in this wide zone blocking scheme as well, and reach block. So he's great. You got Austin Blythe, a really good athlete, kind of your classic lighter center, 6'3", just under 300 pounds, but someone that's very comfortable on the move and is probably a better zone blocking scheme fit than Ethan Pocic was. So from a run block perspective, I think Seahawks fans will like what they see in him. Gabe Jackson is, again, fine, just solid, big-bodied dude. Not ideal for a wide zone blocking scheme because he's not a great athlete, but he's serviceable. And then Abraham Lucas, I think, does have the athleticism. Ironically, there was an identical criticism on both Lucas and Cross coming from a Mike Leach system. Obviously, Washington State, they still have the residue of Mike Leach, and the offense has not changed much. And then Charles Cross literally played for Mike Leach, and that is a spread, air raid type of 2-point stances, not a lot of running the ball at all. And with Lucas and Cross, it's just a projection as far as will they be better run blockers. And I think Lucas is a little bit more uncomfortable moving forward than what we saw from Charles Cross in those limited sample sizes. So it's definitely going to be an area that he's got to prove that he can run block. And we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. But he has the strength and athleticism to do it. We'll just have to find out. As far as the depth goes, I like Kieran's run blocking. Really a bad athlete, but he is strong, and you can see that the grip strength and his ability to sustain blocks was there. Stone Forsythe is, I think, a really bad run blocker. He was at Florida and hasn't been able to get on the field here. I think that's probably what's held him back. Phil Haynes, similarly to what we said, just keep an eye on him. I think he's a talented player waiting on his opportunity, and when he gets it, I think he will take hold of a starting job. I want to say a 4th-round pick for this team 2 years ago, maybe a 6th-rounder. But again, just a big-bodied, strong dude, looks plenty athletic from what I saw. And if he gets an opportunity, whether it's at center or if a guard goes down, I think you have good depth there. But it's really just Kieran and Haynes and nobody else. It's just not a good offensive line. But from a run blocking perspective, certainly better than they are from a pass blocking perspective. I do want to talk about the skill position blocking that you're getting here. DK Metcalf is not as good of a run blocker as he could be. He has some dominant run block wins, but the consistency may be an effort issue there. Tyler Lockett and D. Eskridge, really smaller bodied guys. They don't have their Cooper Kupp in this Rams offense or their Tyler Boyd in this Bengals offense, which is the same system. So they're not getting that kind of hybrid tight end, if you will, though you have Noah Fant. So I wouldn't be surprised if Noah Fant ends up kind of being a slot receiver a lot of times and kind of plays the Cooper Kupp role a lot of the times, who's like a down blocker on play action and a guy that's asked to reach safeties and weak side linebackers. I think you could see an uptick in Noah Fant's run blocking ability in that type of assignment as opposed to being more of an inline tight end. So I suppose keep an eye on that. You don't really have any depth pieces that are very good run blockers either. So, for a system that does really ask a lot of these receivers from a run blocking perspective, they don't have the best guys. And I frankly would like to see a lot more consistency from DK Metcalf as a run blocker. But you do have Will Dissly, who is, I would say, a top 10-ish run blocking tight end. Just strong, physical dude. And he plays his role here and will still get plenty of playing time. Got a contract extension this offseason to play that role, so he's good at it. Colby Parkinson's another kind of interesting kind of wing slot receiver blocking option that we could see a decent bit of. And then not listed here is Nick Bellore, the fullback. Only got 20 snaps. It's not an offense that uses a lot of fullback. That's probably the biggest difference between the Shanahan style wide zone offense and the McVay branch. The McVay guys don't really use the fullback, whether it's the Rams, the Bengals, the Seahawks here. So it's a big difference. But he is here. He'll play a little bit, but kind of a non-factor, former linebacker. So not listed there. I'll give him a little bit of a QB run multiplier, whether it's Geno or Drew Lock. I think the threat of play action boots is going to give them a little bit of a boost there. Those guys are mobile quarterbacks that can throw on the move. Probably not going to see a lot of read option game from them. And from a coaching perspective, I think they were fine last year. Got better as the year went on. I'm not really worried about Shane Waldron, but he also hasn't proven to be this genius coordinator either. So there is your run game. They also rank 26th for run game. I do think they have way more potential than that. It's just the running backs are unproven. So it kind of is what it is there. I don't love the run blocking, so that does hold them back there. So I think 26 is about as low as it can get. I would bet that they exceed that, especially in total volume. They are going to want to run the ball a lot, but you might see some hiccups early on from an efficiency standpoint. So no surprise, they're 26th overall offense after ranking both 26th in pass game and run game. I think you have some obvious concerns on this offense, but there are some points, some things you can point to and get excited about, whether it's these running backs or these receivers. Noah Fant was a fun addition, so there's going to be some moments with this offense. I do believe that, and if they do get Baker, it actually would bump them up to 23rd offensively, 22nd in the passing game. So now let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, where we're going to start talking about this pass defense. And I want to start up front with the pass rush. And they only rank 27th. I will say this is a team that over the last 3 years has been maybe behind Detroit or ahead of Detroit as the worst pass rush in the NFL consistently over the last 3 years. It has been a massive liability for this defense. But as we look into 2022, this group makes a lot more sense to me than it has in years past. I think you have a much more clear path for these guys. A lot of these younger players, we get to finally find out if they can play. As I mentioned earlier on, we're saying goodbye to about 2,000 snaps from Dunlap, Maioa, and Rasheem Green. So you're going to see Darrell Taylor get more opportunities. They do bring in Nwosu, but Boye Mafe, Alton Robinson, we're going to really get to find out who on this group can develop and play. And that conversation absolutely starts with Darrell Taylor. And this is a case of me opening my mind on a prospect. I didn't like the pick when they made it in 2020. I think I gave it a D. I watched him at Tennessee. I thought he was, a fourth, fifth round prospect. He was right next to Alton Robinson as a day 3 guy. Someone that to me looked like a bigger bodied guy that should play with more power, but didn't play with power at Tennessee. Tested well, was theoretically athletic, but I just didn't see that insane juice and pop from him. But doesn't get on the field in 2020 for injury, drops a good 10 pounds, and you can really see a difference. Just watch him at Tennessee and watch him in Seattle. He's a different body type, a different level athlete, and the flashes from him as a speed rusher are exciting, and Seahawks fans are excited about this guy, and I can't blame you. There are moments where he spins inside or he wins with get off and bend around the edge, and he has that sort of, the consistency is just not there, but you talk like Brian Burns, Von Miller, I don't think he's quite like that athletic, but fans get excited about speed rushers. You just do, because when they win, they dominate and they make tackles look like fools. And Darrell Taylor is capable of doing that. Now it's a matter of consistency, doing it week in, week out, to the point that he can become a true full-time starter and ascend to being someone you can rely on week in, week out. Because there's games last year where he had some pretty dominant wins and impacted games. And then there's a good chunk of games as well where he's getting 0 pressures, 1 pressure, getting locked up and didn't have an element of power. So you're going to need to see him refine his tool belt, know when to go to certain moves and how to attack certain matchups. But also I would love to see him unlock a little bit more power, because I think it's in there. He doesn't need to be a power rusher, but you want to have a threat of speed to power so that you can win more consistently and not disappear from games. So big year for Darrell Taylor. I'm definitely warming up to him. I don't think he's an established like star pass rusher or anything like that. I think there's a world where he doesn't work out and does become just kind of a good solid third rusher. Maybe a good comparison for that would be like Talk McKinley type. But yeah, we'll see what he can do this year. The arrow's trending up, and he's going to have that runway to play this year. Then you look at the other side, and they sign Uchenna Nwosu because he's played in this Fangio style defense under Brandon Staley, had a very good year for the Chargers last year, an effective number 2 player with a ton of early down versatility. If you want to talk about dropping into coverage, using him on stunts, containing to the edge, like very ideal scheme fit for this full-on 3-4 defense. So they liked him for obvious reasons. But then they get Boye Mafe in the second round, and I think they probably, obviously had him on their board, and they were like, we'd love to get him. We'll see how it plays out. If we don't get him, we like having Nwosu, but they add Boye Mafe to the mix. And I was much lower on Boye Mafe. I actually had a third-round grade on him, and I'm a Gopher fan from Minnesota. I have every reason to be high on Boye Mafe, and I've certainly had my share of Gophers that I really like, and Mafe was just not that case. I really thought he was getting pretty overrated. He had an excellent workout. The physical tools are exciting, but he didn't always show that on tape. I would say he frankly never did show like this elite athletic ceiling. And he, for a guy that was 260 pounds, had no element of power. I like his cross chop. I think he's a capable rusher, but I saw him as much more of someone that was probably going to be a number 3 pass rusher. They take him in the top 50 of the draft. This is somebody that some people thought could have gone in the first round. I just personally disagree with that assessment. I think he has a long way to go. Now, I've warmed up to Darrell Taylor. I can easily warm up to Boye Mafe, and I liked Mafe coming out more than I liked Taylor coming out. I see where he makes sense here, and I can see a route for him to becoming a very good pass rusher. I just think the downside, I think there's a chance they took him in the second round, and he's just a good third rotational guy that can win with a couple different pass rush moves and is just a solid player. But again, I didn't love him as a second round pick. Upside's there. We'll see what he can do. I think he'll kind of split, get in the mix, probably get a good 300 or 400 snaps, and we'll see what he can do. Alton Robinson's another player I like. He does bring a little bit more of a power element than these guys have, and he's had some good games in there, and he's disappeared for games as well. So he will be rotating, and I think early on he probably gets more playing time than Boye. We'll see. I could be wrong about that. I like Tyreek Smith in the fourth. What did they get? They get him in the 5th round. I know I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on him, but they got him way late. My guess is they were like me and probably didn't see a huge, massive gap between those two players, Boye Mafe and Tyreek Smith, and he was still sitting there late. And they're like, I mean, we gotta take another dart throw at this. Mafe is a lengthier, bigger player with more athleticism. But I actually thought Tyreek Smith's tape was a little bit better than Boye Mafe. So I could definitely see a world where Tyreek Smith actually is a better player than Mafe. I think they're pretty dang close. I had a true 3rd on Mafe and a 3rd to a 4th on Tyreek Smith. So pretty, from my perspective, my opinion, those guys are actually pretty comparable players. Mafe just has more of a power upside projection. There's more to unlock there because of the physical tools. So there's your edge group, and it's really just based on upside at this point in time. But if Darrell Taylor hits, this can be a much better pass rush than 27th. The other thing is I do definitely like the interior group here. Shelby Harris is a nice addition. He's just a tenacious, strong player that comes in with really good leverage, and he's a difficult guy to block one-on-one. Poona Ford, you can say very similar things. Poona's actually uniquely talented and underrated here. I think he gets a bad rap around the, not a bad rap, but he's not respected enough around the league because he's such a weird body type. You don't see a lot of 5'11", 310-pound defensive tackles that came into the league undrafted, but he's just such a handful. He's explosive off the ball. He's extremely strong, and you can't get leverage on this guy. So he does win as a pass rusher. And these two guys on the inside, I think it's the best interior rushing duo they've had in a long time. They also signed Quentin Jefferson, who put up 50 pressures for the Raiders last year. He's a nice hybrid defensive end, and he's going to see the field here. Now, the Raiders had more pass rush snaps than like anybody in the league, so like his pass rush win rate isn't reflective of a 50 pressure season, but he's still a really effective like third guy to have. I do like this interior rush. You have Al Woods, who's more of a nose tackle, but is a handful. Same thing with Brian Moan. And then, LJ Collier is a first-round bust at this point, but in a full-time 3-4 system, I know they ran a lot of 3-4 last year, but they were moving it around and getting a little complicated. Just LJ Collier with a more simplified role as a true 3 technique. This is the year that he can prove something, because he's proved nothing to this point. He's going to have to scratch and claw and earn reps here. That is the Seahawk way. It doesn't matter where you were drafted, but he does have an opportunity. He does have athleticism, and he has upside in a true 3-4 system, but he might get drowned out here by all these veterans, and we could just be officially locking him in as a first-round bust, which feels pretty safe at this point. So you got 27th for pass rush. I think you've got a really solid, capable interior group. Nwosu's solid. And then it's really all about, can Darrell Taylor or maybe Boye Mafe ascend to being, a legitimate number 2 rusher first, and then maybe we can talk about being a number 1 rusher, but those guys need to establish themselves as true starting caliber players first, and then we can talk about, more than that. So 27th for pass rush. Then we're going to talk about the coverage unit here, and it's bad. It's really, really bad. I do have this as the worst secondary in the league and 28th for linebacker coverage. So you have Jordan Brooks, who, let's face it, he's still developing his coverage feel. That was his criticism of him coming out of college, and he has developed. It's a little bit better. He gets a little bit more depth. He feels things out a little bit more behind him, but it is still not there. And it's a big year for him to show, former first-round pick, are you more than just a second linebacker and a thumper? Because he's that. We'll talk about his run defense in a little bit. That's been solid. But I want to see him ascend into, Bobby Wagner's shoes here as a guy that is an instinctive, smart coverage player. And he has not shown to be that yet. He's actually shown a lot of issues in coverage. And then Cody Barton has a big opportunity here as well. I like Cody Barton. He's spent years developing here, a 3rd-round pick. Really athletic guy. He's got length. And to me, he has just as much potential, if not more, as Jordan Brooks does as a cover player. He's not quite as strong and nasty in the run game, but you're finally getting an opportunity here in a clear lane for Cody Barton, who's played well when he's gotten opportunities, but Bobby Wagner just has basically never gotten hurt. So you just haven't gotten to see him play a whole lot. And I am excited to watch Cody Barton. He's definitely a breakout candidate, and there's upside there. You have a really athletic trio of cover guys behind Brooks and Barton. Ben Burke-Hervin is a player I liked coming out of Washington. More of a weak side linebacker, fit and undersized guy. So in this 3-4 defense, I think he probably gets flushed out a little bit. He was drafted for a previous regime in a different scheme. They don't really have that true weak side backer role in this defense. Tanner Muse is a fascinating prospect. Was drafted by the Raiders, did not make the team, but played safety at Clemson, so he has that coverage background, but entirely unproven in the NFL. Joel Igbinoghene, who Desai worked with in Chicago, I really think just a special teamer here, has done a good job of that for Chicago, but has never been able to establish himself as a cover linebacker. And then you have some kind of undrafted types rounding out the competition. Not too familiar with Donker, Radigan, or Jones. I imagine maybe one makes the team, but you might just see those 5 there ahead of them making it. So they rank 28th for linebacker coverage. The upside's there. You have 2 fantastic athletes in Brooks and Barton, but they got to prove it this year. But then the secondary, you don't even have a lot of upside in this secondary. At least the linebackers, you can see a world where those guys hit and become a top 16 unit. I can't imagine the Seahawks secondary being any better than 28th. Like, starting with the corners, you have Sidney Jones, who has turned his career around. He's been able to stay healthy. I don't mind him as a, maybe a low-end number 2 corner. If you had a better guy opposite of him, I think he's capable. But he's your number 1, and you don't even know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. Then opposite of him, you basically have an open opportunity here. Trey Brown started at the end of last year. I like Trey Brown out of Oklahoma. He's a shorter guy. Really fun Senior Bowl. He had one of the best Senior Bowl defensive back performances you'll ever see. He's not afraid to get in guys' face and play press man coverage. A guy with ball skills who played a similar system to this quarters-heavy defense that they're going to have this year. He played a similar system back in his Oklahoma days. So I look at him and say he's got a really good case to win the number 2 corner job. And maybe he can thrive and be a Darius Williams type of playmaking, undersized perimeter corner, be the DJ Reed replacement here, if you will. I do think the upside to be that kind of a player is there. It's just, again, entirely unproven. So they draft Kobe Bryant in the 4th round. My comp for Kobe Bryant, who I did have actually a late day 3 grade on, I probably wouldn't have drafted him in the 4th round, but my pro comp for him is Rasul Douglas. And Rasul Douglas has bounced around the league. He's had a lot of struggles, but in a quarters-heavy system where he could really use his head, read the quarterback's eyes, play off coverage where he's protected over the top, or at least, it's not press man coverage where you have to bump and run and keep pace. It's just different. You don't need as much speed to play outside off man in a cover 4 system. You just don't. So Kobe Bryant goes to the perfect place. This is the same defensive scheme that Green Bay runs, where Rasul Douglas did break out. So my evaluation on Kobe Bryant, that's a league-wide evaluation. If you are one of these systems, I do see where you could have, a 4th round evaluation on Kobe Bryant. So he's going to compete with Trey Brown. He's going to compete with Artie Burns as well. And Artie was in Chicago with Sean Desai, and I really like bringing him over here because limited playing time and had a hard time staying healthy, missed the 2020 season. But man, when he played last year, Artie Burns balled the F out for Chicago. He was like a lockdown corner when he was rotating in and out the last 5 games for the Bears. So, I'm almost talking myself into this group. It is a projection for those guys, but I think you do have 3 interesting pieces, and I am excited to see who wins that job, because there's certain levels of upside for all these guys. But let's face it, Artie Burns has been in the league for 6 years, hasn't done anything. Trey Brown was a 4th round pick. He's undersized with a lack of actually, he's pretty fast. I won't say a lack of long speed. I like Trey Brown. Kobe Bryant, really smart, instinctive zone corner that just is scheme dependent and probably never going to be anything more than a number 2 corner. So there is definitely an opportunity and a window for some of these guys to ascend to basically better than I'm ranking them currently. But there's also a world where none of these guys work out and you're sitting there with the worst number 2 corner in the league, right? So that's a huge issue. But then you look in the slot, and I really don't like this. I don't like signing Justin Coleman at all, because you just freaking know Pete Carroll is going to be drooling over the opportunity to put Justin Coleman back on the field. Coleman has not been a good player for about 2 years now. And maybe a different system here, the quarters defense works better for him. It's possible. He's been, years and years ago, a really good slot corner, but that's not him anymore. And you just know Pete Carroll cannot wait to start him over John Reed or Ugo Amadi or even like Trey Brown in the slot with Bryant on the outside. So I hope, and this is nothing against Justin Coleman. Like, what I really hope is that he balls out and becomes the best slot corner in the league. Like, good for you. But as someone that wants this defense to succeed, like, I hope that, this is harsh, but I hope Coleman doesn't make the team and they go to John Reed, because I think Reed's super athletic. He's played well when given an opportunity. You're not going to be this great defense. Why not go with the young John Reed and start rounding out maybe a fun, explosive secondary? Because Reed has that potential from the slot. We'll see how it plays out. Ugo Amadi has played as well. He's kind of a safety corner hybrid. I think he'll have his role as like a dime backer, but as a full-time starting slot corner, he's kind of shown that he's not that at this point. So Reed's the one guy that I want to see beat Justin Coleman out, because I don't think Coleman's going to be anything short of a problem for your secondary. The other guy here is Tariq Woolen. I think even though they're changing schemes here, Pete Carroll just couldn't help himself but say, we got to draft the 6'4", 200-pound corner with 4.3 speed. I think he sucks. I will just be honest. I had a 6th-round grade on him, and I had him worth a dart throw because he ran a fast 40 time. I always say gamble on speed. There's a world where it works out, but he is so stiff in the hips. He can't turn and run. In an off coverage system where he's going to have to identify underneath stuff and close distances quickly, the short area stuff for him is rough. He's got long speed. In like an old like press cover 3 system, he would have worked probably, but that's not what they're running anymore. So I don't believe in Tariq Woolen. We'll see. I could easily be wrong about that, but he's there, I guess. And then you have the safety group, which is interesting. I think you have a slightly overrated player in Quandre Diggs, though not trying to dunk on him. I like Quandre Diggs a lot. And then a slightly underrated player at this point in Jamal Adams, which is funny. So Diggs is a super opportunistic safety. He has some weeks where he's keyed in and he makes some splash plays, some beautiful interceptions, and it gets you fired up, man. But he's not some elite coverage safety. He's a very good cover safety. I like Quandre Diggs. Is he Jesse Bates? No. But he's just a good, sound, free safety. I like him in this system as well because, Jamal Adams is kind of weird here, actually. But the Fangio-style defense is quarters a lot of the times. And you want these hybrid safeties, oftentimes with slot corner experience, like Quandre Diggs, because you're going to play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage as opposed to like cover 3 free safety or cover 2 where you're bailing deep, right? Stay deeper than the deepest. That's not really quarters. Quarters, you got to come up and be able to flip your hips and run vertical and not get beat over the top. And I think Quandre Diggs can do that because he is a more fluid guy that can run more man-to-man stuff. So I do like how he fits here. And it's not just going to be all quarters. They'll be in cover 3, absolutely, and he can be your free safety in cover 3. But Jamal Adams is unique here, and I'm very curious how this secondary is going to shape up. Because those coverages we just described, quarters, I'm not convinced Jamal Adams can run that. He is a bigger guy, he's a little bit more tight and not quite as fast, like flipping and running vertically. At least the last couple years. Back in his Jets days, like he could absolutely run cover 4, but I don't know. He just hasn't been the same guy here in Seattle. So he's definitely a wild card for this defense from a coverage perspective. I do think there's absolutely a role for him as that star. And that's where this picture would look a lot different. Think about how Jalen Ramsey is used for the Rams defense. Very similar defense where they actually put Jalen Ramsey as the slot corner on earlier downs, especially because he can be such a presence against the run and he can really navigate the middle of the field well. I think that would be a great spot for Jamal Adams, almost as a glorified slot corner here. Again, I have no idea how exactly they're going to use him, and I'm excited to see how it works out. But as of now, I don't know if that's the route they're going to go. I think they maybe try him as a up-top safety, and I think he can handle it. But if he is moving like he has the last couple of years, he could be an issue in coverage, and you might want him more down in the line of scrimmage. So, new defense. I think a little bit more optimistic for Jamal Adams moving forward, because this guy has been just roasted. Like, there's a narrative that Jamal Adams is one of the worst safeties in the NFL right now. Like, from a coverage perspective, he has really struggled here in Seattle. But I do think he's more athletic than he's played the last couple of years for whatever reason. I think there's more in there. I think he's just such a smart player that if the coaching and the scheme fit is right, I can see Jamal Adams getting back to that top level. But man, it is hard to believe that that's coming based on the way he's played the last couple of years. So he's definitely an interesting conversation. If you did move him down into the box more, I don't know who else is going to step up. That's a big problem, right? Like, maybe Coleman could play safety. Maybe it's Ugo Amadi, actually, with that slot corner experience, could be a third safety that plays a lot. Maybe it's John Reed. Ryan Neal is a physical safety that's been the Jamal Adams like strong safety replacement, but I don't think that's him. Marquise Blair still has some upside. Another guy that's played a lot of slot corner for this team. In theory, this is a really good scheme fit for Marquise Blair, who I liked coming out, but just has not been able to stay healthy. So, you kind of have some of these hybrid defensive backs that might make sense as your too high guy next to Quandre Diggs if you're going to move Jamal Adams down into the box as a kind of slot corner hybrid linebacker role. There are options, but just not a lot of pieces behind those two safeties that you feel very confident in. So it's tough. It is going to be a kind of, putting a puzzle together for Sean Desai and these guys, trying to figure out what the best secondary is here. The pieces make sense, but the pieces aren't very good right now. So they do rank last for DB coverage. And just defensive coaching, I like Sean Desai, but I don't think you can rank them too high, so they're at 24th for that. They're the 31st ranked pass defense. They've got a lot to figure out. This has not been a good pass defense over the last few years, and there's upside there, but again, they got to put these pieces together. But then you look at the run defense, it's a pretty dang good run defense. They actually rank 14th. The interior defensive line is really good, and I almost regret mocking this team to get Jordan Davis, because taking a second look at this, that was pretty stupid. Like, they have a really good interior defensive line. Al Woods is a baller. He's 35 years old, but he played at 34 last year. Who's to say he can't repeat at 35? This guy is a true nose. He is impossible to move. He's been an underrated player for a long time, and he's back here, and I don't expect him to drop off. It's possible at 35 years old, but just playing a good 200, 300 snaps as a base nose tackle, I think he's going to be just fine. Puna and Shelby Harris, I love these guys. Shelby, they're very similar. They're a little bit smaller, but as, 3 techs, they're going to be moving all over the place. And just, they come in low and hot and fast and physical. Just very good run defenders with instincts. Now, you have some flexibility here as well. Puna can absolutely play nose. He's uniquely difficult to move. So, like, true early downs against heavy packages, I think what you're seeing here is what this front looks like. If it's more like, 2nd and 7 against, 12 personnel, maybe you take Woods out and put Quentin Jefferson in. They have options. Quentin Jefferson's a horrible run defender, but a more solid pass rusher. And as a true 4-eye in a base 3-4 defense, he can hold his own. So you have a lot of depth. You have pieces to move around. Brian Moan is a very capable nose tackle in his own right. So he's kind of buried there, but he's usable. LJ Collier, similar conversation with Quentin Jefferson. Athletic guy with, in his case, more theoretical upside to rush the passer, but a horrid run defender. So we've talked about Collier and his opportunities here. I think this is your 6. I don't see Hewitt or Adams being a factor there as the undrafted kind of year 2 guys, but it's a really fun defensive line. I like this group, and I had a ton of fun watching Poona Ford back, man. He is underrated as hell as a run defender. On the edge, it's not as good. It's not nearly as good. Nwosu's capable. He'll contain the edge. He's got quickness to kind of sidestep blocks and stuff. He's not a liability, but he's not some force. Darrell Taylor is a problem. He lost a lot of weight and just can't really handle blocks in the run game right now. So you might see a little bit of Alton Robinson on early downs, Boye Mafe, Tyreek Smith. If Darrell Taylor's a real problem, you have some other guys that maybe are a little bit more physical, but at the end of the day, the edge group, it's not a really nice run defending rotation, I suppose. These linebackers, I think, are going to be more than good enough against the run. Jordan Brooks has highlight plays. He's physical. He will miss tackles and will take some bad angles at times, but still an above average, good run defender, in my opinion. And, kind of being thrust into more of a leadership role here, I think he might play with a little bit more discipline and continue to get better there. And then Cody Barton, as we talked about, he's a big dude. There's no reason he can't ascend to becoming a really solid number 2 linebacker here. So I think these guys from a run defense standpoint will be more than good enough, with potential to be even more than that. Then the secondary run defense, you got Jamal Adams. He is one of the true game-changing run defending defensive backs. And I kind of mentioned they're going to figure out where exactly he's going to play in this defense, but for all of his knocks as a cover player, this guy is everywhere against the run, and getting him back healthy is going to be a boost for this entire run defense. Justin Coleman, though, from the slot is below average, lighter guy that just is more of a cover slot. These perimeter corners are fine, just down the board. I think Kobe Bryant played really physical, but he's a rookie, so we'll keep an eye on him. I do like John Reed from the slot. If he does start, he's a really aggressive, physical slot corner, but all in all, you're not getting any massive contributors from the cornerback position. And then Quandre Diggs is going to spend most of his time as a cover safety, but coming downhill, he'll hit you and tackle well. But Jamal Adams is going to be much more of that presence. You rank 4th for defensive back run defense because Jamal Adams is that dude, and 14th for total run defense. I don't think you have that game-changing player up front that some people have, but you have a ton of depth and just a good physical front. It's going to be a strength of this defense, actually, I think, run defense. And if they ended up a top 10 run defense next year, I would not be surprised at all if you saw this edge group play a little bit better than I'm projecting, these linebackers take a step up. I like this run defense. I really do. I was impressed by what I saw from them last year, and I think they're going to be a solid group again this year, if not better. And that rounds out the defense. They ranked 27th overall for defense for me. We heavily weight pass defense. Pass defense gets 70% of the overall defensive grade for me, so that's going to bring them down from the 14th run defense. But yeah, I think this is the most intriguing defense in Seattle that they've had for years. I've been just so uninspired by the groups they've trotted out. And I think with Desai coming in, some of these younger players getting more opportunities, more runway, but it's not all that. You got Justin Coleman, right? And you've got some veteran roadblocks still. But for the most part, I like the projection for this defense to finally start to grow and build something to the point that maybe by the end of the year, this is the 20th best defense, which is better than they've been for several years now. The team rankings overall, again, 28th. Special teams ranking 23rd. They actually had a horrible special teams ranking last year. I do trust Pete Carroll to kind of clean that up a little bit, but I'm mostly going off of how this team was last year. Special teams is very just random a lot of times, so I think they'll clean some things up. I don't have an issue with their kicking game, so they rank kind of middle of the pack, 23rd for special teams. And now let's wrap up with this team's schedule and talk about the Vegas over-under. They are a 5.5 win total team here, and my projection has them at 5.4. I think that's pretty bang on. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I don't see a Pete Carroll coached team finishing with the number 1 pick. I really don't. I don't like this roster a whole lot, but the Seahawks have always been just scrappy and kind of better as an underdog sometimes. They're still going to have that 12-man home field advantage, so they're going to win some games that you didn't expect them to, because that's just kind of what the Seahawks have been for the Pete Carroll era. Obviously, they spent a lot of time as a heavy favorite as well, but I look at their schedule. I think there's games here, especially in this division, or home games against like the Raiders, the Falcons, the Giants, the Broncos. Like I can totally see them beating Russell Wilson at home in a loud Monday night game where the defense plays better than you expect, right? So this roster might not be a 6-win roster, but I can easily see this team scrapping out some tough home games, especially, or beating the Bucks randomly in Germany. Like, there's games on this schedule that are very much winnable for them. So I would not bet the over or the under here. Now, a sneaky bet is to bet the over, because if they get Baker, I think they are more of a 6, 7, 8 win team, and I do think they get Baker. So it's something to think about. I'll just end the video with that. If they get Baker, I think this could be a sneaky like 7 seed sleeper, if everything kind of comes together. So there is your Seahawks deep dive. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Please do hit that like button if you did. Drop your comments down below. Too high, too low, just right on the ranking. And these are going to be every week now for the month of June. I'm trying to crank out 3 more of these this week before I go to Europe. And the goal is to drop one every Sunday until July, when we'll really pick up the pace, but I'm going to be gone. So I really hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys for the next one. Peace out.